Good evening and Jai Hind to all my young friends on this group. So I think that all of you know that on this date, 21st of October 1943, that is 77 years ago, in the Cathay Hall in Singapore, the foundation of the Provisional Government of Azad Hind took place under the leadership of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, I would just like to give you a little bit of background. This was not just some kind of formal declaration or something without any meaning. From the very beginning, from the beginning time that Netaji left India, when he went to Germany first and then later came to Japan, he was very, very firm on one question, and that was he would not be treated as a junior ally or as a dependent by either of the powers, that is the government of Germany or the government of Tokyo, Japan. He insisted that he represented the Indian people and he should and would be treated as an equal and as an ally. And therefore, when he finally came to Singapore and he was handed over the charge of the Indian National Army, even before he addressed the soldiers of the army, he held a meeting with the people who belonged to the India Independence League, and he told them very clearly that we have to treat with the Japanese on an equal footing. We cannot allow them to think of us as their dependents. We are not at all accepting the fact that if we are victorious, Japan will be able to enter India. No, we will enter India and we will be the representatives of free India. So for that we have to be the representatives of the Indian people even now when India is not free. And he told all those Indian origin leaders who formed the India Independence League and their supporters in Singapore that you have to collect money. We have to raise money from the people of Indian origin who are living in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Burma, in Thailand, all over Southeast Asia. We have to collect money from them and they have to be made responsible for a large part of the expenses of the Azad Hind Fauj, the INA. Of course, we are dependent on the Japanese for ammunition. We are also dependent on them for training and help, but we will also raise our own resources for our soldiers. And he said two very important things, that we will also recruit civilians from the Indian origin population of Southeast Asia, and we will train them also to become soldiers. Now, this was a very important thing because this proved the fact that Netaji was not either a puppet of the Japanese, nor did he accept that position when he went to Germany to talk to Hitler. In both places, number one, he recruited Indian soldiers. They were soldiers who had been captured by the Germans in Germany, and once he shifted to Singapore, then of course the large part of the army that became the Azad Hind Fauj was soldiers who had surrendered to the Japanese, soldiers and officers. But apart from them, thousands of Indian civilians who lived in Southeast Asia had no military training at all. They were also recruited and they were also given training, and all the expenses of recruiting them, of training them, were paid for by the Indian community, the migrant community of Indian origin in Southeast Asia. In addition, as you all know, along with the male civilians, he also recruited women civilians and formed the Rani of Jhansi regiment, and Captain Lakshmi Swaminathan was appointed the head of that regiment. Now, I must tell you that as far as this regiment is concerned, the Japanese absolutely refused to accept his suggestion for such a regiment. They, as you know, had very patriarchal views. They never thought of women as equals, and they couldn't imagine women fighting with arms for their freedom. So they point blank refused to have anything to do with such a regiment. But Netaji said, we are determined, it is our decision, and once again, it is the people of Indian origin in South Asia who will pay for all the recruitment and all the training and all the whatever are the needs of the women's regiment. So in this way, this is very important for us to remember, in this way Netaji established the fact that he was speaking as a representative of the Indian people, and he would not accept any kind of second grade status as far as the Japanese were concerned. I would also like to tell you that even before the provisional government was formed, he had told the Japanese very clearly that all the intelligence within India was to be conducted by the INA and not by the Japanese military or their intelligence wing. He had also told the Japanese, because you may be knowing that the islands of Nicobar and Andamans had been seized by the Japanese from the British, and Netaji said to them very clearly that they should be handed over to the INA, and they should come under his administration. So these were very, very important points that he had been emphasizing from the very moment that he landed in Singapore, and there was no question of him being a puppet of the Japanese. It is in this context that we have to understand that he declared the formation of the provisional government of Azad Hind on the 21st of October. Now, the declaration of the provisional government was written entirely by Netaji. He had been studying both the Irish Republican Declaration of Independence and also the American Declaration of Independence, and he took points from both these very important historical documents before he prepared his own declaration of provisional government of Azad Hind. Now, what was specified in this document was that India would be, the provisional government represented free India, it represented a secular India, and I would go on emphasizing to all of you who are part of this group that the secular nature of society, the secular nature of government was very important as far as Netaji was concerned. He was very opposed to all communal forces. He abhorred communal forces. In my last talk to you also, I had told you that when he became president of the Congress of the AICC, he had made a change in the Congress constitution, and any Congress member who was also a member of either the Muslim League or the Hindu Mahasabha had to either resign from the Congress or resign from these organizations. There was no possibility of a Congress member belonging to a communal organization. After he was in that very disgraceful fashion forced to resign from his second term as Congress president, the Congress went back on this change, and many prominent members of the Congress remained members of the Hindu Mahasabha, and many of them also became members of the Muslim League. And perhaps this was also an extremely unfortunate event or an extremely unfortunate development as far as the future of our country was concerned. But for Netaji, communal politics had absolutely no space in national politics. I don't know whether you know, but when he was in Calcutta as a leader of the national movement, even when he formed the Forward Bloc, he used to say that I will never allow the Hindu Mahasabha to even hold a public meeting in Kolkata. If they try to hold a meeting, break the stage, let them, force them to leave, but do not allow them to spread their communal poison in our city. That was his approach. And so when we read the declaration of the provisional government of Azad Hind, it is committed to secular values, it is committed to equality of all people, men and women, people belonging to all castes, people belonging to all religions. I hope you all know that Netaji was also very much opposed to the caste system. I don't know whether you have read his early life, but once one of his classmates in the hostel where he was studying, he was someone who belonged to the so-called lower caste, a man called Majhi. He developed typhoid, and actually no one was prepared to really look after him. So Netaji went and stayed in his room night and day, nursing this young man until he regained his health. That was the kind of commitment he had to abolition of caste and all forms of untouchability and chua-chut and Varn Ashram Dharma. And in the free India that he dreamt of, there would be no place for castes, there would be no place for communalism. He was very clear about this, and all his actions in his life as a congressman, as a Forward Bloc leader, and later as the leader of the INA and the Azad Hind Fauj, he had absolutely no compunctions in voicing his very clear opinions on all these subjects. Now, you are asking me questions right now which I'll take up later on. I don't need to answer them now. And in fact, I think you should study. You want to know what was the relationship between him and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. Well, I've just told you what was his opinion of the Hindu Mahasabha. And you should know that Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was the leader of the Hindu Mahasabha, and Subhash Chandra Bose was totally opposed to the communal politics of this Hindu Mahasabha. In fact, much later, when the Hindu Mahasabha formed a coalition government in West Bengal, it was with other groups, and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee had to actually give up his ties. But these are things that you should confirm from your own reading and your own study, because these are very important facts that you should know about Subhash Chandra Bose's attitude towards communal politics. So in the declaration of the provisional government of Azad Hind, he gave a lot of emphasis to the equality of all citizens and to equality of people of all religions, belonging to all communities. Everybody in society was to be equal. All were to have equal rights and also equal duties. And if we see the composition of the first ministry of the provisional government, I think that you all know that Netaji was, of course, the Prime Minister, and there were altogether 12 members of the cabinet. Now, out of those 12 members, one was a woman. I could hope that there could be more than one woman, but anyway, one was a woman, which is not a bad percentage, and I'm sure he would have increased it later had he become the Prime Minister of Free India also, but one woman. But there were 4 members of the minority community. Now that's very important. That means that out of 12 cabinet ministers, 4 were Muslims. And that means that 1/3, fully 30%, 33% of the cabinet were Muslims. And also he took care to select people who belong to different parts of India, who belong to South India, who belong to Punjab, who belong to Bengal, who belong to all the different parts of India, so that everybody looking at this cabinet all Indians inside India and outside India, all of them would feel a sense that they were being represented by this cabinet. You should also know that he wrote the proclamation of the provisional government in the night of the 19th and 20th. And on the 20th, that proclamation was translated into English, into Roman English, into Hindustani, and also into Tamil, because as you probably know, most of the Indians settled in South Asia, that is those from the migrant Indian families who were settled there, most of them came from South India, and they neither knew Hindustani nor were they very familiar with English. Many of them were working class people, plantation workers. So the third language that was used was the language of Tamil, so that all people who were living there, who were filled with pride and happiness with the declaration of provisional government of Azad Hind, all of them could understand the proclamation, and all of them could appreciate the sentiments that had been included in that proclamation by Netaji himself, who wrote it, as I told you, on the night of the 19th and 20th. In addition to the members of the cabinet, there were also advisors, and it's very important that people from the migrant community of living in Burma, that means Indian immigrants living in Burma, living in Malaysia, in Singapore, and in other parts of Southeast Asia, their representatives also found place in the provisional government as advisors. And among them was one from the Sardar community, because there was a sizable number of Sardars who were living in South Asia, especially in Burma. So they also found their representative among the advisors of the provisional government. Now, this provisional government was immediately recognized by 9 countries, and these were, of course, Germany, Japan, and also other countries which were part of the alliance, like Turkey and some other countries. So 9 sovereign countries recognized the provisional government. So it was not just something that was on a piece of paper. It was not just something that was sort of just a formality. It was a government which was given recognition by 9 countries, and it was a government because immediately after this, after the swearing in a very huge, before a very huge audience, enthusiastic audience, in the Cathay Hall in Singapore, immediately after that, an oath, the copy of an oath was published in very large numbers, in which people could sign the oath and become citizens of this provisional government. And in this oath, they had to accept Netaji as their leader and commit themselves. They had to make a promise, make a vow that they were committed to the freedom of India. So it was not something like what the government of India is trying to do today, which is trying to say that many people who are born in India, citizens of India, are not Indian citizens, and is trying to drive them away actually on the basis of religion. But the oath that people had to sign after the formation of the provisional government of Azad Hind was an oath which said, I accept Netaji as my leader, and I am committed to fight for India's freedom. This was the only condition that they had to accept. And thousands of people, including, of course, all the soldiers of the INA, women soldiers and male soldiers also, all signed this oath. So therefore, this is very important that they all now became citizens. They all became citizens of a government in exile, which was this provisional government of Azad Hind, a government to whom they swore their loyalty. So therefore, they were no longer loyal British citizens, or no longer bound by their oath to the British government and the British crown. They were now only bound by their oath to the provisional government of Azad Hind. And to the oath taken, which they signed, that they would accept Netaji as their leader and that they were committed to fight and to contribute in every way possible to India's freedom. Now, this, as you know, happened on the 21st of October. After that, of course, there were many celebrations and there was a lot of activity with the signing of the oath and the distribution of the proclamation in all the three languages that I told you. More and more people were enthusiastically coming to know of the formation of this government. And after that, this is also something very important for you to know. After that, Netaji went in the beginning of November to Japan. And he went to Japan as the head of the provisional government of Azad Hind. That means he went as an equal when he went to meet the Japanese government. Now, this is something that we should remember because there is still a lot of wrong things that are written, and our history books don't tell us the truth. That, had the Japanese won the war, then India would have become a Japanese slave. This is all rubbish, because what I'm going to tell you is that when Netaji went to Tokyo as the head of the provisional government of Azad Hind, he had talks with General Tojo, who was the head of the government in Japan, because it was a monarchy. There was the emperor, and then there was General Tojo, and he had already met General Tojo before coming to Singapore and had impressed him a great deal. He met General Tojo again, and there was a public assurance that was made that the islands of Nicobar and Andamans would be handed over to the provisional government of Azad Hind, and also that the intelligence department would be now part of the Azad Hind Fauj and not part of the Japanese army. These were commitments that were made. And soon after Netaji landed in Tokyo, there was a conference of people's representatives from different places in Southeast Asia, and Netaji also addressed this conference. He attended the conference as an observer. Now, why did he attend the conference as an observer? Please try to understand. Most of the other people who attended this conference were coming from countries in East Asia that had been taken over or conquered by the Japanese army. So in that sense, most of the people who attended this conference as delegates, they were representing their people, yes, but they were also, in a sense, they were the subjects of the Japanese, because their countries had been conquered by the Japanese. Now, Netaji wanted to make it very clear at this conference that his position was completely different. While his country was still a colony of the British Empire, he himself was the head of the provisional government. He was an independent head of state representing the Indian people, and so therefore he could not come to this conference like the other delegates came. He came as an observer to show that there was a marked difference between himself and the others. But he did address the conference, and his address was accepted very, very enthusiastically, because he spoke of the future in which colonialism itself would have been defeated, and all the people who were attending this conference would become subjects of free countries. All their countries would be freed from their earlier British conquerors and their later Japanese conquerors, and the Indian people would also be free. There would be a free India. He spoke of that future of the free countries of Asia, and he was greeted very, very enthusiastically. And the Japanese also made a public commitment that at the end of the war, India would be an independent country under the leadership of Subhash Chandra Bose. So there was no question of the Japanese replacing the British in India. Please try to remember this. This was made very clear by everything that Netaji did and by the commitments that he got from the Japanese. And he always said to people who questioned him, because the press used to also question him, he always said, do you think that after kicking the British out, we will accept one other ruler instead of the British rulers? We will never do that. First of all, I am sure that the Japanese will honor their commitments to treat India as a free country. And secondly, I can assure you that if the Japanese or anybody else tries to replace the British, we will kick them out also, just as we are going to kick the British out. So these are things that we have to be very clear about. And the nature of the provisional government of the Azad Hind also, we have to understand. It had its own currency. Many of you may have seen the notes and the coins that were issued, and they had their own bank, because this currency obviously had to be backed up. And it was backed up by the Bank of Azad Hind. It was a separate bank, it was not a Japanese bank. And that bank had all the money which used to be collected from the, as I told you, the Indian migrant communities in all of South Asia. And Netaji was relentless in collecting money. He insisted that they should become paupers. He said, poor people give me every penny that they have, but rich people bargain 5%, 10%. No, you must also give all that you have for the cause of Indian freedom. And he was able to collect huge amounts of money from people, rich bankers, rich traders, rich businessmen, and rich landlords in South Asia who were of Indian origin. He was able to collect huge sums of money from them. And the poor people who were there, poor workers, plantation workers, poor clerks, they used to empty their pockets, and young women used to take off their jewelry and hand it over to Netaji whenever he made an appeal. So in this way, he was able to collect large sums of money with which he was able to pay for the training and the equipment of all the civilian recruits of the Azad Hind and also the women's regiment. I also want to tell you that he signed an agreement with the Japanese. And this is very important. He signed an agreement with the Japanese and said that all the expenditure that you are incurring on behalf of the Azad Hind Fauj, in terms of training material, in terms of ammunition, arms, and all the other help that you are giving, all this is a loan. And I want this to be written down. I am signing an agreement that this is a loan. And as soon as India becomes free, I am responsible for repaying this loan. The provisional government of Azad Hind will certainly repay this loan that we have received from the Japanese for the purposes of setting up our Indian National Army, equipping it and arming it. So that is the kind of personality that he had. He did not want India's head to be bowed down before anybody else. He did not want anyone to take the credit for fighting for Indian independence other than Indians themselves. And he didn't want any country in the world to treat Indians or their representatives, which he was, as inferior or in any way dependent on them. No. You see, the Azad Hind Fauj currency of that time, of course it is not a legal currency today. Please understand that. That bank also does not exist today. The British took everything when they defeated the Japanese. But that currency paid for all the expenses of the provisional government. That means the civilian recruits, all their administrative work, Netaji and all the other cabinet ministers' expenses, their living expenses, their travelling, all that was paid for by the provisional government in its own currency. And I'll try and photograph those currency notes and send them to your WhatsApp group so that you can look at them. I'm sure some other members of your group also have this currency. Please ask them also to look for it. So, as I said, the Azad provisional government had its own ministry, it had its own prime minister, it had its advisors, it was recognized by 9 countries, it had its proclamation, and it had its own bank, it had its own currency. And all this was essential if Netaji was to do what he wanted to do, which was to be treated as an equal by all other governments and to be treated as an equal representative of the Indian people. So that is the importance of the establishment of the provisional government of Azad Hind. And I must tell you that after a few months, the islands of Nicobar and Andamans were handed over to the provisional government, and Netaji actually went by flight and landed there, and there are photographs of him walking on the seashore under the palm trees in the moonlight on those islands when they were handed over, and the flag of provisional government of Azad Hind actually flew over those islands, including that cellular jail. Now about the flag. You see, as you know, the flag of Free India as decided by the Congress was the tricolor with Gandhiji's charkha in the middle. Now, Netaji retained that flag as the national flag, but the INA had its own flag, and on the uniforms of all the soldiers was the INA flag. And this is very important, please remember this, because there are a lot of communal minded people who are trying to encroach on the legacy of the INA, which they have no business to do. Because what was the flag of the INA itself, do you know? The flag of the INA, which was there on the shoulders of all the, it was on the shoulders of all the INA it was on the shoulders of all the INA soldiers. So, what was that flag? That was also the tricolor. But in the middle, instead of the charkha, was the springing tiger. And that springing tiger was the symbol of Tipu Sultan. That was the symbol that Tipu Sultan had on his flag, because Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose always said he had great respect for Tipu Sultan. He always said that he was the first of the Indian rulers to fight against the British. In some ways, he was the first Indian freedom fighter. Now, you all know that the government we have today, both in Karnataka and in Delhi, they are relentless in their efforts to defame Tipu Sultan, to try and erase his memory, to do everything to denigrate him. But if you see what Netaji did, Netaji used Tipu's springing tiger, that wonderful symbol of bravery and strength. He used that instead of the charkha in the flag, the tricolor that every single INA soldier, man and woman, had on his and her uniform on the shoulders. So this is a very important fact also that we have to remember. I think that the last time I spoke to you, I had told you that after the formation of the INA, Netaji, along with many of his soldiers and also people who joined in Burma, he visited the mazar, the grave of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor of India, who had been exiled to Burma by the British, and he had to live in very, very miserable conditions. He was literally kept without proper food, without proper arrangements, without health facilities, and he died a really very terrible death. But he never compromised with the British. He never apologized to the British. He never surrendered to the British, unlike many people who today are being described as freedom fighters like Savarkar. But Bahadur Shah Zafar did not do that. And so Netaji went with his INA soldiers and officers to the grave of Bahadur Shah Zafar, and he gave the grave a guard of honor. His soldiers gave Bahadur Shah Zafar a guard of honor, and he placed a chadar on the mazar, and he made a speech in which he saluted the memory of Bahadur Shah Zafar as the symbol of the unity of all those who revolted and fought against the British in 1857. He said, "I salute you as a symbol of that unity." And he made a vow that if he returned to India as the leader of free India, he would bring the remains of Bahadur Shah Zafar back and bury them in the Red Fort where they deserve to be buried. So these are some of the very important things that you should know about the spirit of the provisional government, of the declaration of the provisional government, the ideals of that provisional government, and actually the fact that it was a functioning government with a bank, with its own currency, with its own flag, and with its own motto. And many people say that the motto is Jai Hind. No. Jai Hind is the greeting. The motto was Etmad, Ittihad, Qurbani. And he deliberately used Urdu words again as a mark of his determination to keep the people of India together. And those words mean unity, agreement, that is solidarity, and sacrifice. So this was the motto of the provisional government of Azad Hind: Etmad, Ittihad, Qurbani. And you should remember these three words. You can remember them in Bangla, you can remember them in English, in whichever language you like, but you should remember them because those words signify what Netaji believed in, and that is why that became the motto of the provisional government of the Azad Hind Fauj. Now, as you all know, though the Indian National Army did enter India at Imphal, and the tricolour was raised there, and the local population also greeted them very enthusiastically. But as you all know, Japan had to surrender to the British, and even after the surrender, the INA stayed on in Imphal for 2 or 3 months very bravely, but then they were bombed from the air by the British Air Force, and they had to surrender in very, very difficult, very inhuman conditions. They displayed great bravery and great courage. And Netaji also had to retreat from his headquarters, and much of the way he walked along with his soldiers and officers. I mean, these are all amazing things about Netaji that you should know. But I must tell you what was important even after the surrender of the Azad Hind Fauj, why the establishment of the provisional government proved to be extremely important later on. You all know that the INA had to surrender to the British along with the Japanese, and many thousands of INA soldiers were brought back to India as prisoners of war. They were kept in the Red Fort, and 3 officers, Sehgal, Dhillon and Shahnawaz, were put on trial. And they were put on trial for having broken their oath to the King of England, for having become traitors against the King of England and fought against the British Indian Army. So, what was their main defense? I hope you all know that Sri Bhulabhai Desai, who was a brilliant nationalist lawyer, he argued the case even though he was a very, very sick man and he died soon after this. But he argued the case. And what was his main argument? He said these soldiers stopped being British citizens the day their officers surrendered to the Japanese. Their officers transferred all these soldiers to the Japanese and said, now we are no longer responsible for you. You are freed from all responsibility towards us. That means they were freed of their oath to the British. And not only that, after the provisional government was formed, all these soldiers had signed the oath. And that oath said that they accepted Subhash Chandra Bose as their leader. They were committed to the freedom of India and they were citizens of the provisional government of Azad Hind. They were its subjects, not British subjects. So this was a very important argument that Bhulabhai Desai made in the Red Fort in defense of the three officers, and this was an argument that was echoing all over the world. All over the world, people were appreciating the fact that fighting for the freedom of one's country was much more important than serving those who had enslaved your country. This was a very important principle that freedom fighters all over the world have accepted ever since then and have always used in their own defense. So the fact that these three officers had signed an oath pledging allegiance to the provisional government of Azad Hind Fauj, Azad Hind, a government that was recognized by other countries, and also pledging allegiance to the leadership of Subhash Chandra Bose, committing themselves to the freedom of their country. All this meant that they were not British citizens. They had become free of their oath of loyalty to the British Crown, and therefore they could not be accused and tried for treachery. This was the main argument made in their defense in the Red Fort trial, and you can say they lost, yes, they lost the case, but it was this argument. Please remember that until the trial started, nobody in India knew that there was such a thing as the INA. They knew that Netaji had disappeared. They knew that Netaji was somewhere in East Asia fighting the British. They had some vague idea about it. Some people who were maybe Congress leaders, maybe members of his family, had some information. But the vast masses of the Indian people knew nothing about the INA. They knew nothing about the provisional government of Azad Hind. But in the course of the trial, when these arguments were repeated day after day after day, and all the newspapers and international newspapers carried all these facts in their headlines, when the radios broadcast all these facts, everyone in the length and breadth of India came to know that not only was there an Indian army of liberation that was formed to fight for the freedom of India, but that Netaji, a beloved nationalist leader of the country, had actually set up a government in exile, the provisional government of Azad Hind, of which there was a bank, there were notes, there was a flag, and it had its own army. And it was this army that had been fighting the British for freedom. It was the soldiers of this army who were now being tried in the Red Fort for treason. And this inflamed people across the country. Please try to get some records of those days. There were huge demonstrations. People faced police bullets fighting for the rights of the INA soldiers. And finally, when they lost the case, when the British said, yes, they are traitors, they were to be hanged, but then they couldn't hang them. Then they were to be transported for life. But what did the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army say? Claude Auchinleck. He said, if we deport these three people, there is a real danger of revolt in the Indian Army. The Indian Army will revolt. There will not be any Indian Army left. Every single English person in India will be threatened. Their lives will be threatened. The mood of the people is such that we cannot take the risk of deporting these three people for life. And it was a court martial that they were undergoing. They were not being tried in a civil court. They were being tried by a military court. And this is what the head of the British military had to say. And so he had to say, we cannot take the risk of deporting them, and therefore we are setting them free. Imagine 3 people accused and convicted, found guilty of treachery against the crown, against the British Army. They had to be set free because of the enthusiasm that the news of the provisional government of Azad Hind having been set up in 1943 in Singapore, the news of the way in which the Azad Hind Fauj soldiers had fought for freedom, and the news of the way in which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had unfurled the flag of free India in Singapore, in Burma, in Imphal, in Manipur, in Andamans, in Nicobar. This news, this information not only saved the lives of those who were being tried in the Red Fort, but we believe, many of us believe, and many historians believe, this news certainly forced the British to decide that they could no longer rule India, that India could no longer remain a colony. India would have to be set free. They would have to leave. Otherwise, India would revolt, the military would revolt, and the way in which they left would be something that weakened them forever. And so they had to make their arrangements for a hasty departure, but we all know that that hasty departure also partitioned our country and left us with a bloody legacy of communal strife, of communal killings, which has continued to cast its shadow on the history of our country till today. Therefore, my dear friends who are listening to this talk, please learn more about the INA. Don't just turn great heroes into gods. Don't turn Netaji into a god. He was not a god. He was an extremely brave, patriotic Indian who thought about Indian freedom morning, noon and night. He had no other commitment in his life. He abandoned his wife, he abandoned his daughter, he abandoned his family. He abandoned everything to fight for Indian freedom. And he was able to inspire thousands and thousands and thousands of others to sacrifice their lives for Indian freedom. He was able to organize an army of liberation of Indians outside the soil of India. He was able to plant the flag of free India outside India and proclaim the provisional government of Azad Hind. All this was very, very important in pushing our freedom movement further and inspiring the people of our country to come together and create a situation after the INA trial in which the British knew that they would have to leave India, they could not rule anymore. And tragically, they partitioned India before they left. But the legacy of Provisional Government of Azad Hind, the legacy of Azad Hind Fauj, and the legacy of Netaji lives on forever. That is what we must remember. That is what we salute today. And that is what I would like all of you to study and learn more about. Jai Hind. Thank you.